All right, let's talk about a name that's pretty much legendary for all the wrong reasons. Caligula. For 2,000 years, if you wanted to describe a crazy, cruel tyrant, you'd just use his name. But was the third Roman emperor really the monster history paints him as? Or is there maybe a little more to the story? We're going to break down the man, the myth, and the straight-up madness.
I mean, this quote says it all, doesn't it? This is the line that has followed him through history. It's the kind of thing you'd expect a movie villain to say. It perfectly sums up the legend of a man who ruled not with respect or love, but with pure, cold terror.
But here's the thing. Before he was this terrifying figure, he was just a little boy named Gaius, and he had this adorable nickname, Caligula, which actually means little boot. He got it from his father's soldiers because he'd run around the military camps in a tiny, custom-made soldier's uniform. He wasn't a monster. He was the army's beloved mascot.
And you've got to understand, his dad wasn't just some general. Germanicus was a rock star, a war hero, beloved by the people, the guy everyone assumed would be emperor one day. So Caligula was born with these huge expectations on his shoulders. He was supposed to be the heir to this incredible legacy.
And then his entire world just falls apart. Look at this timeline. First, his heroic father dies, and pretty much everyone thinks he was poisoned. Then the reigning emperor, Tiberius, goes after the rest of his family. His mother and brothers are accused of treason, exiled, and left to die in horrible conditions. Just like that, little Caligula is the last man standing.
So, to survive, as a teenager, he gets summoned to live with the very man who destroyed his family, Emperor Tiberius. Can you imagine? He had to put on an act every single day, hiding all his anger and resentment behind this mask of total obedience. He played the part of the perfect servant, just waiting for his moment. This quote just nails that duality, the survivor who is secretly learning how to be a tyrant. And then his moment arrives. Tiberius dies. And at just 24 years old, Caligula is the new emperor, and Rome goes absolutely wild. They called him their baby, their star. The son of their hero Germanicus was finally in charge. Everyone believed a new golden age was about to begin.
And for the first few months, it really looked like they were right. He did everything perfectly. He gave bonuses to the soldiers, he publicly burned the secret police files from the old regime, and he put an end to the terrifying treason trials. He was popular, he was just, it was amazing. One historian at the time literally called these first 7 months a golden age.
It was a perfect start, right? A dream come true for Rome. So, what on earth went wrong? How did Rome's beloved star turn into one of the most hated figures in all of history? Well, the ancient writers all point to this one single event. About 8 months into his reign, Caligula gets hit with this horrible, mysterious illness. It was so bad that everyone thought he was going to die. The whole empire was praying for him to recover. And he did, but the man who got out of bed was not the same man who had fallen ill. After he recovered, it's like a switch flipped. The golden age was over. The kind, generous ruler was just gone. In his place was someone paranoid, cruel, and completely unpredictable. The reign of terror was about to begin. And the change was just shocking. He executes his own cousin, the guy who was supposed to be his co-heir. He starts humiliating powerful senators for fun, making them run next to his chariot for miles. There's one absolutely sickening story where he has a man's son killed and then forces the grieving father to come have dinner with him that same night. This wasn't just tyranny, it was sadistic.
Now, one person who saw all of this unfold up close was the famous philosopher Seneca. He was a senator, so he had a front-row seat to Caligula's madness, and it almost got him killed. Caligula was apparently so jealous of Seneca's speaking skills that he almost had him executed.
Being a philosopher, Seneca tried to understand what was happening. He saw Caligula's behavior through the lens of a concept he called ira. Now, ira isn't just being angry. For Seneca, it was a destructive, irrational rage, a complete loss of reason. He basically diagnosed Caligula as suffering from a kind of madness.
And really, this was the ultimate showdown happening in Rome. On one side, you have Caligula, who is the living embodiment of impulsive cruelty and a massive ego. And on the other, you have the stoic ideals of Seneca: reason, self-control, mercy. It was a battle between absolute power and absolute virtue, playing out in real time.
As time went on, Caligula's ego just seemed to inflate beyond all reason. He started these gigantic, ridiculously expensive building projects. The most famous one was probably the temporary floating bridge he built across a huge bay for no other reason than so he could ride his favorite horse across it and say he'd ridden over the sea. 2.7 billion. That is the estimated number of sesterces, the Roman currency, that Caligula burned through in his first year as emperor. He inherited a massive fortune and just set it on fire, creating a huge financial crisis. His solution? He started accusing rich people of treason so he could kill them and take their money.
But for the Roman elite, this was the final straw. He decided he was a god. First, he starts showing up in public dressed as Apollo or Hercules. Okay, weird. Then he starts chopping the heads off statues of gods and replacing them with his own. Before long, he's just calling himself Jupiter and demanding that people worship him as a living god on Earth.
And this was the moment he almost blew up the whole empire. He ordered a giant statue of himself to be put inside the temple in Jerusalem, the holiest place in Judaism. This was such a profound insult, such an act of blasphemy, that it caused riots and almost started a full-blown rebellion in the East.
This quote really captures how he felt about his own people. Apparently, he was annoyed by the crowd at the games one day and wished they all shared a single neck so he could cut it with one swing of his sword. Whether he actually said it or not, it shows you what people thought of him. 30. That's how many times he was stabbed. After just under 4 years, the people closest to him had finally had enough. A group of his own bodyguards, the Praetorian Guard, conspired with some senators. They cornered him in a hallway of the palace, and that was the end.
So case closed, right? He was clearly an evil, insane monster. Well, this is where history gets tricky, because now we have to ask a really important question. Who told us this story in the first place? And more importantly, can we actually trust them? See, here's the problem. When you look at where these stories come from, you realize none of our sources were exactly neutral. Seneca was a political rival who Caligula had personally threatened. Philo was a diplomat whose people Caligula had openly mocked. And the big historians, Suetonius and Tacitus, they were writing long after he was dead, getting their information from, you guessed it, the senators he had spent his reign terrorizing.
And this is really the key to the whole mystery. In Roman politics, character assassination was a sport. If you wanted to destroy a dead emperor's reputation, you'd accuse him of all sorts of wild stuff, insanity, incest, you name it. It was the ancient version of a political smear campaign. So, it's very possible that some of the craziest stories about Caligula were just propaganda, cooked up by his enemies to make sure no one ever felt sorry for him.
So that leaves us with the big question. Was Caligula the monster we all think he was? Or was he a deeply traumatized young man who just snapped under the immense pressure of his past and his power? Or is the Caligula we know today mostly a fiction, a ghost story written by the people who killed him? The real answer is probably buried somewhere in the middle of all three.